Hey guys, tonight we're heading deep beneath the clouds into the glowing heat of an ancient forge that never goes out. You're not lounging in the clouds with Zeus or galloping across the ocean with Poseidon tonight. No, you're crawling through smoke-filled tunnels, dodging embers, and probably stepping on a few poorly placed bronze gears. Because tonight you're visiting Hephaestus, the god of fire, volcanoes, metalworking, and very bad family dynamics. Don't expect marble columns and shimmering robes here. This is grease-stained tunics, soot-caked faces, and the unmistakable smell of burnt sandals. You'll meet the mythological loner who made weapons for gods, traps for enemies, and fully functioning bronze robots centuries before science fiction even knew what to do with the idea. And yes, you probably wouldn't survive 5 minutes in his forge without accidentally welding your own foot to an anvil. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. And hey, drop your location and what time it is in the comments. I love seeing where everyone's drifting off from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The air around you thickens. There's no fresh mountain breeze down here. Instead, you inhale the metallic tang of copper shavings and feel the gentle pulse of heat that radiates off glowing, fire-lit stone. It's not a proper forge without a little discomfort. You're not inside a volcano yet, but you're close. This is where it all begins, the dim, red-lit workshop of a forgotten god, still rough around the edges. Hephaestus didn't come into the world with thunderbolts or tidal waves. He came in with a thud, followed by silence. According to the myth, Hera, queen of the gods, looked at her newborn son and frowned. He wasn't divine enough. Some say he had a twisted foot. Others say his face wasn't god-tier gorgeous. Either way, she made a very harsh parenting choice and hurled the baby straight off Mount Olympus. Now, historians argue whether this story reflects an early Greek discomfort with physical disability or whether it's a later allegory added to explain why a smith god lives below instead of above. But in myth, that screaming bundle of divine disappointment fell for a full day and night, like a divine cannonball with chubby cheeks, and finally landed in the sea. Imagine that fall, nothing but clouds for hours, probably made a few pigeons very uncomfortable, then finally splash. Hephaestus didn't drown though. He was scooped up by two kind sea nymphs, Thetis and Eurynome, who apparently saw a falling baby and said, "Sure, we'll raise that." They tucked him into an underwater grotto with coral walls, pearl lamps, and plenty of weird fish to keep him company. Here's where things get interesting, because while other divine children were learning politics and proper god posturing, Hephaestus was lighting bits of driftwood on fire and melting seashells to see what would happen. Not your typical toddler hobby. Some myths claim he began crafting jewelry for his sea nymph moms, using underwater lava vents as miniature furnaces. If you're picturing a toddler with a hammer and a headband made of seaweed, you're not far off. One of his earliest works? A necklace so stunning that it caused a mortal queen's downfall. Classic. Still, nobody really came looking for him. Zeus was too busy being Zeus. Hera probably not entering any Mother of the Year contests. So Hephaestus, chubby-legged and still limping from that very long fall, just kept building. Historians still debate whether this part of the myth reflects older, pre-Olympian deities who were later folded into the fancier Zeus-led pantheon. There's even evidence that smith gods in earlier Mediterranean cultures were seen as both powerful and cursed indispensable, but always on the margins. Down in the sea cave, time doesn't pass like it does on land. You spend your days scavenging metals from sunken ships, and your nights shaping blades from what the ocean spits out. And every now and then, you whisper a name, Hera, just to see how it feels in the salt-heavy air. Your hammer is small at first, really just a chunk of coral strapped to a rock, but over time it evolves. You hammer bronze with rhythmic precision. You invent tongs from crab claws. You accidentally set your hair on fire once, but you learn fire obeys you now. The forge becomes your second skin. The tools whisper back. You start to hear metal the way musicians hear notes, each clang a phrase, each spark a message, and eventually someone up on Olympus notices. Not your mother, of course, but the gods do love shiny things, and word spreads. There's someone crafting miracles beneath the waves. You, the fallen godchild, are about to make your return, but not because someone missed you. No, this is going to be revenge, gift wrapped in bronze, and you're going to deliver it in person. You're not walking up Olympus's grand marble steps with a grin and a welcome basket. You're limping, yes, still, with a plan built from bronze, wired with fury, and lacquered in spite. Hephaestus, now a teen god with soot under his nails and an attitude forged in fire, is about to send a little gift to the gods. And not just any gods. He's targeting the one who threw him out like an expired yogurt, Hera. What do you build for the queen of the gods? A throne, of course. A gleaming, elegant, golden throne that would make even the snobbiest interior decorator drool. But this wasn't just a seat. It was a trap. Imagine it. A chair so gorgeous it sings when you look at it. No one questions where it came from. No one suspects the sea cave outcast. Hera sees it. She loves it. She sits. And then boom, bronze clamps, invisible gears, and divine hydraulics snap into place. She's stuck. Arms, legs, hips, all locked in like a high fantasy car seat. The other gods panic. They tug, they twist, they bribe. Nothing works. Hephaestus had engineered it with one user in mind, Hera, and 0 exits. Some myths say he refused to return to Olympus at all, ignoring every message. Others claim Dionysus, the god of wine and good times, finally tracked him down, got him gloriously drunk, and coaxed him back up the mountain with promises of peace, fame, and an unlimited workshop budget. Either way, when Hephaestus finally does return to Olympus, it's not as a shamed child, it's as a god with leverage. Hera's still stuck in the chair. The other gods are too embarrassed to meet your eyes. And you're enjoying every second of the awkward silence. Fix it, they beg. You cross your arms, shift your weight off your bad foot, and say, fine, but I want a forge and a wife. Not just any forge, a divine smithy on Olympus itself, with celestial bellows, immortal anvils, and a lava moat, just because you can. And the wife? Well, they offer you Aphrodite, goddess of love, beauty, and the original out-of-your-league scenario. Historians still argue whether this marriage myth was meant to symbolize balance, beauty, and craftsmanship, passion, and patience, or if it was just the ancient equivalent of someone asking for a PlayStation and getting a Lamborghini. You build your forge above the clouds. No more soggy underwater caves. No more watching Olympus from the shadows. Now your fires light up the heavens, and from here you begin crafting the marvels that legends are made of. First up, thunderbolts for Zeus. Not simple lightning rods. These are divine weapons, etched with storm runes, and so powerful they need to be stored in god-proof chests. Then come tridents for Poseidon, arrows for Apollo, shields for Athena. Your forge becomes the engine room of the pantheon. But you're not just making tools, you're making art, weapons that hum with power, armor that reflects constellations, and occasionally something stranger, because eventually your forge isn't enough. You want creations that can walk, so you build your first automaton. Imagine it, an 8-foot-tall bronze figure with joints like clockwork, eyes of polished obsidian, and a core powered by God-level flame. It doesn't just move, it listens, obeys, learns. You name it Talos. Talos becomes your sentinel, your heavy-footed masterpiece. He patrols the shores of Crete, flinging boulders at enemy ships and stomping around like a mythological Roomba with a mean streak. But you don't stop there. Back in your forge, you begin designing smaller ones, golden maidens with gears in their bellies, and voices like harps. They pour your wine, bring your tools, and probably roll their eyes when you're not looking. They aren't alive. Not quite. But they work, and that's more than you can say for half the Olympians. Modern scholars love Talos. Was he an early idea of artificial intelligence? Was he symbolic of imperial protection, or just a fantasy defense system dreamed up by a god with abandonment issues? The myths don't answer, they just describe the clang of bronze feet, the glow of metal eyes, and the strange fact that this living statue had ichor, divine fluid flowing through a vein sealed by a single bronze nail. Pull that nail and down he goes. You make sure not to install any such weaknesses in your other creations. You're not a god who waits for instructions. You're a creator, an inventor. And while the others play politics or chase nymphs, you build, even your sandals. Yes, those are self-propelling. You design a chariot that flies on its own and set it to cruise around Olympus just because walking hurts your foot. Oh, and that foot? Still busted, still dragging a little when you walk. But you've turned it into a signature. Every clink on Olympus's golden floor reminds them the god they threw out is the one holding everything together. At night, when the other gods sleep, you don't. You hammer, you sketch, you melt and mold. Sparks rise like fireflies around you. You don't need dreams, you make them real. And yet, somewhere in the back of your forge, half covered by a velvet cloth, sits the first prototype. Not Talos, not the golden maidens, but a small, misshapen bronze baby. Your first ever sculpture, hammered together underwater before you even knew what you were. It doesn't work, it never did, but you keep it, just in case. The firelight in your forge casts long shadows against the vaulted ceiling, flickering across shelves, stacked with tools, gears, and things only you understand. Sparks leap from your anvil like miniature suns. You've made so many things now. Armor for Ares, arrows for Artemis, and even that ridiculous helmet for Hades that makes him invisible and unapproachable, as if he weren't already. But tonight, you want to build something that breathes, or at least comes close. You've long since realized the gods aren't interested in understanding, they want results. Shiny, loud, dangerous results. So while they drink nectar and squabble about who gets to sit where, at dinner, you're down here pushing the boundaries of life itself. That's when you decide to build Pandora. Oh, you've heard the whispers, how the gods think she's just a punishment delivery system for mankind. Zeus wants a beautiful trap to send to Earth, a weapon dressed up as a bride, a divine Trojan horse packed not with soldiers, but with secrets. You're not thrilled about being their contractor on this one, but you agree. Not because you like the plan, not because you like Zeus, but because, well, the challenge excites you. So you begin. First, you mold her shape from clay, not the lumpy gray stuff mortals use, but a refined, glowing substance from the river Oceanus, soft as silk, heavy as sorrow. You give her the stance of a goddess and the delicacy of a harp string. Her fingers are slender, almost alive. Her face is carved with such care that even Aphrodite raises an eyebrow. You're not building a statue. You're building a mystery. You're not alone in this, of course. The other gods each contribute their gift to Pandora. Athena gives her wisdom. Aphrodite gives beauty. Hermes adds a little mischief because of course he does, and someone even throws in sewing skills. Zeus, meanwhile, fills a jar with horrors and seals it shut. He tells Pandora not to open it. Sure, that always works. You don't argue, you just build her. But when you're done, you don't celebrate. You watch, because for the first time, something you made looks back. She blinks, breathes, smiles, and you feel something unfamiliar, dread. She's handed off like an offering, dressed in finery, and married to Epimetheus, the dimmer of the Titan brothers. You tried to warn him. He didn't listen. No one ever listens. She opens the jar, and what spills out is everything. Pain, hunger, plague, envy, chaos, each one a creeping mist that slithers into the human world and settles there like it owns the place. Historians still argue whether Pandora was a deliberate curse or a misunderstood creation. Was she a cautionary tale, a symbol of curiosity, or just the gods being petty after Prometheus stole fire? Whatever she was meant to be, you know what she really was: a success. You didn't just build a woman, you built the first myth of consequence. The mortals remember Prometheus for the flame, but you know the truth. It's Pandora who changed everything, and that haunts you. So you retreat, back to the forge, back to the comfort of bronze and bellows, and the soothing rhythm of hammer against metal. You swear you won't make anything like her again. Instead, you focus on machines, on logic, on things that can't bleed or open jars, but the memory lingers. Meanwhile, Olympus continues its eternal soap opera. Zeus throws tantrums and thunderbolts. Hera plays power games. Aphrodite flirts with half the pantheon and still finds time to critique your designs. You stay mostly out of it, except when someone breaks something. You're the repair guy, the weapons master, the one who quietly keeps the divine machine running, and no one thanks you. One day, Ares bursts into your forge, trailing smoke and dramatic threats, demanding a new spear after his last one, mysteriously melted during battle. You give him a blank look, hand him a broom, and point him toward the corner. He doesn't get it. Another day, Dionysus shows up half sloshed and asks if you can make a wine goblet that sings. You tell him it already does. He's just too drunk to hear it. But then there's Athena. She's the only one who respects the process. She doesn't barge in. She observes. She asks questions, watches you work, even offers improvements. Sometimes you wonder if she's the only god besides you who actually thinks. You begin working on a new project. Not for Zeus, not for Hera, not even for yourself. You want to build a pair of bronze birds, small, swift, delicate, not weapons, not traps, just flight. And so you do. They flap, they glide, they even sing in soft metallic trills. When you show them to Athena, she doesn't say anything for a while. Then she just nods, and that's enough. But not everyone likes the idea of a god building things that move on their own. Whispers reach your ears. Some say you're meddling with nature. Others accuse you of trying to replace life. You don't respond. You just add another lock to your forge door. Because here's the truth. You don't want to replace life. You want to understand it, control it, rebuild it better. And if that makes the gods uncomfortable, good. Let them be nervous. Let them wonder what you're working on behind that flame-lit curtain. Because while they dream, you design. While they forget, you forge. And one day soon, you're going to build something that doesn't just move or breathe. It will choose. The forge never really sleeps, even when you're not hammering or welding or shaping the bones of Olympus. It hums. The air is thick with the perfume of molten bronze, old oil, and smoldering coal. It's not pleasant, but it's home. The rhythm of tools tapping and bellows sighing has become your lullaby, if you ever slept, that is. But tonight, you're not making tools or toys for the gods. You're crafting something stranger. You're building Talos. The plan started like a whisper in your mind, probably during one of those long, silent evenings when you couldn't get Pandora's eyes out of your head. The gods asked for defense, something to guard the shores of Crete, a deterrent for pirates, a sentinel for the golden age that they insisted was coming, even though none of them seemed remotely peaceful. You said yes, of course. You always do. And now you're staring up at the unfinished frame of Talos, your biggest project yet, 12 feet tall, chest like a furnace, joints that click when the room goes silent. He looks like a man carved from war itself. The bronze you've used isn't ordinary. It comes from the veins of the earth, melted down with strange minerals brought by Hecate herself. They shimmer when polished, reflecting a version of you that somehow looks more tired than usual. Inside Talos, you run a single vein of ichor, divine lifeblood, reserved for gods. You begged some from Zeus with a half-joking promise to make him a lightning-resistant robe in return. He grunted, handed over a flask, and wandered off muttering about eagles. Now that ichor pulses faintly in Talos's frame, a single glowing line from neck to ankle. It's not quite life, but it's enough. You watch as he takes his first step. It's slow, heavy, deliberate, but it's a step. And that moment, when something you made moves without your hand guiding it, is like nothing else. It's terrifying and addictive, like watching your child stand for the first time, if your child were made of metal and could crush a ship with one fist. Talos becomes the guardian of Crete, patrolling the coastline with mechanical precision. He doesn't speak, but he doesn't need to. His presence is message enough. Turn back. You are not welcome here. Historians still argue whether Talos was meant to protect mortals from invaders or to protect the gods' secrets from the mortals. Was he defense or was he surveillance? Was he gift or threat? You never clarify. Instead, you stay in your forge and tinker with his joints, refining his balance, softening the clank of his stride until he moves like a dancer in slow motion. You add a small compartment in his chest, not for weapons, but for music, a set of tuned chimes that only play in the wind as he walks the cliffs. That's the part no one ever notices. They see the muscle, the menace, the metallic roar, but not the music. Even the gods ignore it. Except Hermes, who once stopped mid-flight, cocked his head, and asked if Talos was whistling on purpose. You told him yes. He nodded, then immediately tried to race the robot along the coastline. He lost. Talos was a success, too much of one. Soon others began asking for copies. Make us another one, Poseidon barked. But with gills, Athena suggested a winged version, something to patrol the skies over her temples. Even Artemis hinted she could use one in the forest to keep poachers nervous. You refused them all, because you know where this leads. First it's one, then a dozen, then a legion, and you've seen what the gods do with legions, so you focus instead on the small things, a bronze bee that gathers pollen from lightning-scorched flowers, a mechanical cricket that chirps lullabies in the dark, tiny, unnoticed inventions that live quietly in the margins of Olympus. One day, Talos begins to slow down. His ichor line dims. You check everything, joints, valves, plates, but it's not mechanical. It's age, or something like it. You never expected your creation to grow old, but here he is, standing on the shoreline with the wind in his gears, swaying like a grandfather tree. You don't try to fix it. You let him fade. And when he finally stops, 1 foot planted in the surf, 1 fist against his heart, you don't weep. You collect the pieces, one by one, and bury them beneath the forge. The gods ask what happened. You tell them Talos fell defending Crete from an unknown threat. They nod, satisfied with the drama, but the truth is simpler. He lived, and then he didn't, just like everything else you build. Still, you keep building, because the urge doesn't stop, even after Talos, even after Pandora, even after the stars themselves seem tired of watching you work. Somewhere deep in your forge, you sketch out new designs, things with wings, things with wheels, things that fold themselves like flowers and whisper your name. Maybe, Someday you'll even make something that chooses not to serve, something that builds itself. You don't tell the gods. Let them sleep. Let them dream of power and thrones and immortality. You'll be down here, creating, waiting, listening for the music. Your forge is quieter now. Not silent, never that, but quieter. The clanging has softened into more delicate taps, the roaring flames reduced to a low, steady flicker. After Talos, you needed something smaller, less thunderous, less tragic, maybe even something useless in the most comforting way. So you begin making helpers, not servants, helpers. There's a difference. They're small, these bronze automatons, some barely the size of a loaf of bread. One looks like a dog, with twitching ears and a tail that wags when it senses movement. Another is shaped like a hummingbird, wings beating too fast for the eye to catch. You've made dozens by now, and they wander your workshop like strange little pets. They don't speak, they don't fight, they don't guard temples or breathe fire. They just help. One holds your tools as you work, another fetches kindling, a third dusts the shelves, though admittedly not very well. Historians still argue whether these were the first true robots, entities with basic awareness and purpose, or simply toys for a lonely god. You don't argue. You're too busy rewinding the spring legs of a mechanical goat who keeps falling down the stairs. And then one day, they begin making each other. It starts with your beetle-shaped automaton. You named him Scamandrios, after some long-forgotten Trojan prince. Scamandrios has always been curious. He scuttles over to your desk while you're asleep at your workbench. Yes, you doze off occasionally, despite what you tell people. And when you wake up, you find a crude sketch of a bird in the dust, drawn by tiny claw marks. The next morning, there's a rough bronze avian half-finished. Scamandrios had borrowed tools, gathered scraps, soldered a wing. You laugh at first, then you stare, because it shouldn't be possible. The little beetle isn't sentient, not truly, but he's learning patterns, mimicking you, repeating tasks, innovating in his own way. The thought is both thrilling and terrifying. You lean back in your chair, a half-finished gear in your hand, and mutter, "What are you becoming?" The beetle chirps. It's probably nothing, a coincidence, a fluke, except it keeps happening. Now the hummingbird helps Scamandrios. The goat starts sorting tools by size. Your dog-shaped automaton scratches the floor and draws basic schematics. They're organizing. They're learning. One night, you pretend to leave the forge early. You turn off the lights, shut the heavy bronze door, and step just outside. You wait. Inside, you hear nothing for a while. Then the squeak of metal limbs, the soft clack of parts being moved, the hiss of a tiny forge flame, somehow lit without your help. You peek through the vents. They're working. Together. You should be proud. You should be horrified. You're not sure which feeling is stronger. Hephaestus, the loneliest god, has made himself a family of machines, not ones who obey orders or guard treasure, but ones who live, just a little, not through magic, not through divine breath, but through routine, through care, through exposure to your habits. It's a strange kind of love. You remember once, long ago, when Athena told you that wisdom isn't just knowledge, it's pattern recognition. You scoffed at the time, but now you wonder, are they wise or just very good mimics? Either way, it doesn't matter, because for the first time in years, you find yourself smiling when you enter the forge. They greet you in their own way, clicking, buzzing, nudging your ankles with cold metal snouts. And when you sit to work, they settle beside you, tools ready. One automaton, shaped like a weasel, curls up in your lap and hums quietly. You pet it, absent-mindedly. You can't remember the last time you touched something gently. The gods have noticed. Hera came by the other day. She stood outside your forge, arms folded, watching a small bronze cat walk in circles. "You're wasting your gifts," she said. "These things have no purpose." You didn't answer because purpose, as you've learned, isn't about impressing the gods. It's about staying sane, about surviving the long hours of immortality without losing the thread of yourself. Besides, your automata do have a purpose. They bring you tea. They rearrange your chaos. One of them even hums lullabies as you drift off on your bench, soot smudging your cheek. No, they're not warriors, but neither are you, not anymore, and that's okay. Still, deep inside you, a strange thought stirs. If these creatures can learn, can they dream? You ask the beetle one day, as it polishes a tiny mirror. Do you ever wonder what it's like to be human? It doesn't answer, but it tilts its head, and for a moment, just a moment, you could swear its reflection in the mirror doesn't quite match its posture, probably just fatigue. Still, you make a note, just in case. After all, every story about creation ends the same way. The creation asks, why? You're not ready for that question, but one day you will be, and maybe, just maybe, you'll have an answer. You barely sleep anymore, not because you can't, though gods don't exactly drift off like mortals do, but because every time you shut your eyes, your mind keeps hammering away at something new. Not swords, not shields, not even mechanical goats. Ideas, ideas shaped like people. For a while now, your little helpers have been building other little helpers. You've been watching them, noting how they choose certain materials over others, how they prioritize symmetry, balance, motion. It's eerie, like observing tiny blacksmiths born from your own imagination, now evolving on their own, and you start to wonder what happens when you try it with intention. You begin to design something grander, not a guard like Talos, not a pet, something different, something shaped like a woman, a being of intricate beauty and impossible detail, not for protection, not for companionship exactly, but as a statement, an answer perhaps to a challenge no one has spoken aloud. Historians still argue whether this woman of bronze, Galatea, as poets later named her, was ever real. A prototype, a metaphor, an echo of your loneliness. They don't agree, but the schematics you etched into the stone wall still survive, hidden deep in the volcanic tunnels behind your forge. She begins as an outline in your mind, eyes made of polished onyx, hair of delicate copper wire, joints smoother than any weapon you've forged. You study dancers for weeks. Yes, Hephaestus, god of fire, squatting awkwardly behind temple colonnades, sketching the fluid arc of a woman's movement. You ask Apollo how muscle memory works. You even borrow a scroll from Athena, despite your long-standing tension. She sighs and rolls her eyes but hands it over. You want her to move like something alive, to breathe figuratively, if not literally, to make people question what separates the divine from the designed. And so, piece by piece, she comes together. Your forge becomes a sacred space of precision and obsession. You smelt special alloys, ones that reflect moonlight with an almost skin-like shimmer. Her fingers contain tiny gears you had to forge using lenses and tweezers, muttering curses with every jammed cog. The day you attach her hands is the day you stop calling her it. She's not alive, you know that. But when you turn around and catch her silhouette against the glowing forge, for a heartbeat, you forget. You haven't named her. That would make it real. That would mean something. Instead, you test her reflexes, calibrate her limbs. She walks within a week, dances within 2, smiles, not out of joy, but because you installed the mechanisms just right. And when she turns her head to follow your movement, you step back. It's working. Too well, maybe. You start having conversations with her, even though she doesn't speak. Not yet. You ask her what she sees. You tell her about your fall from Olympus, about the first hammer you held, about how mortals stare at your limp and wonder if you deserve godhood. You joke about how you're the only Olympian who actually does his own work. She never responds. but her silence feels oddly comforting. The other gods hear whispers of what you've built. Rumors ripple across Olympus like steam from a cracked pipe. Ares visits one day, stomping into your forge, expecting to find a weapon. He finds her instead. She's adjusting her own ankle joint, the same way you do when your leg acts up. Ares snorts. Still making toys? You hand him a bronze dagger just to distract him, and he leaves without further comment. But Hera sees her, and her reaction is complicated. Your mother never approves of your project, but when she lays eyes on the bronze woman, her usual disdain falters. For once, she looks at you with something like respect or fear. Don't let this get out of hand, she murmurs. Things that resemble us tend to ask questions we aren't ready to answer. You nod, but you know it's too late, because she already has a name. You whisper it when you're alone, Pandora, not because you want to curse her, but because she contains a mystery you can't define, an unopened box of potential. You don't give her emotions, not really, but sometimes she tilts her head at the beetle automaton, Scamandrios, and reaches out her hand. Sometimes she watches the fire for hours. Sometimes you wonder if you've made the first artist. You stop short of giving her speech. The last thing you want is an argument about the nature of free will while you're trying to finish your tea. Still, her presence changes the forge. The other automatons become quieter, more orderly. It's as though they understand that she's different, that she's the apex of something they began. One night, she places a cooling cloth on your forehead when you collapse from exhaustion. You didn't teach her that. She learned it, and you lie there wondering, if she ever asks why you made her, what will you say? Because the truth is messy. Loneliness, ego, boredom, a hunger for something you can't name. But maybe that's how all creators feel. Maybe that's how the gods felt when they made humans. You glance at her once more before you sleep. Her eyes are turned toward the night sky beyond the forge vents. She doesn't move, but you feel like she's thinking, and for the first time, you're not afraid of what comes next. You're curious. Pandora never blinks. That's not just a poetic metaphor. She literally doesn't. You forgot to program it. And yet, over time, she seems to do it anyway. It happens once when you're adjusting her wrist joint. Just a tiny flicker of the lids, soft and fluid. You don't remember installing that mechanism. But you shrug and log it under spontaneous gear settlement. Sure, that sounds like science. You've built dozens of bronze beings by now, but none like her. She stands apart. The others clank, stutter, obey. Pandora seems to listen. When Zeus finds out, you brace for trouble. He visits in a chariot made of cloud and arrogance, trailing lightning like it's fashion week in the heavens. You guide him down to your forge with as little small talk as possible. He squints at Pandora. It's a statue, he mutters. No, you reply softly. It's the future. The moment's thick with divine tension. You can practically hear your bronze beetles tiptoeing away behind you. Scamandrios vanishes under a table. The god of the sky stands there, staring into the eyes of a machine made by the god he once hurled off a mountain. And then he smirks. Make me one. You blink. Excuse me? Not a woman. I've already got enough of those, he says, winking in the general direction of Olympus. Make me an army. Bronze soldiers. Indestructible. Loyal. No thoughts of their own. Just power. You stare at him. This is the fork in the road. The moment that historians still argue over. Did Hephaestus willingly create the automatons of war? Did Zeus force his hand? Or did something deeper, something self-protective and insecure, make you agree? It's never clear. What is clear is this: the forge roars back to life. You sketch blueprints faster than ever before, your hands guided by equal parts genius and dread. Tall, hollow soldiers with serrated shields, archers with revolving torsos, juggernauts that never sleep. They don't think, They don't blink. They don't hesitate. Unlike Pandora, she watches you build them, and you can't help noticing she looks sad. Okay, not sad exactly. Her face doesn't change much, but there's a tilt to her shoulders now, a stiffness, as if she's figured something out and wishes she hadn't. You work in silence day and night. The forge sings with molten metal and purpose. Your hands are blistered, your back aches, and you haven't trimmed your beard in weeks. But every time you take a break, Pandora is there, mending a beetle's broken leg, adjusting her own balance, occasionally placing a mug of water beside you, even though she doesn't drink. You begin to talk to her more, not out of loneliness this time, out of guilt. I didn't mean to make you alone, you whisper once, oiling her elbow joint. She says nothing, but her hand grazes your shoulder as she passes. Gentle, mechanical, human. Eventually, Zeus returns. He inspects your bronze soldiers with an appraiser's eye. He nods, smiles, leaves without thanking you, and you feel hollow. Because in your obsession with perfection, you built something soulless, impressive, efficient, but soulless. You retreat to the old forge tunnel, where Pandora now spends most of her time. She's building something too, not a soldier, not a dancer, something in between. It's small, only knee-high. Its limbs are thin, its chest cavity open like she's waiting to install something important. A scroll? A compass? A heart? You don't ask. You watch, because now she's not just copying your actions, she's modifying them, innovating, redesigning your own designs. And it scares you, a quiet kind of fear, not of rebellion or danger, but of significance. What if you didn't just make a woman out of bronze? What if you made the first builder? Meanwhile, up on Olympus, they're calling your bronze soldiers the Silent Guard. They station them at temples, palaces, borders. They never eat, never talk. They just stand there, glinting in the sun like statues that could suddenly snap your neck. Some mortals worship them, others flee in terror. You hear rumors from Corinth. A soldier crushed a thief's wrist without a command. In Delphi, one blinked, not like Pandora, a different blink, measured, intentional. You start to lose sleep again. And the forge, once your sanctuary, feels too loud. You slip away at dusk one evening, out of the firelight and into the cool volcanic tunnels. Pandora follows. You sit side by side in the soft hiss of molten earth. No words, just the subtle clicking of her gears, and your own heartbeat, slower than usual. She reaches down, opens a small bronze panel in her chest, and hands you something. It's a drawing, a rough sketch, made with charcoal and beeswax paper. A little bronze girl, holding hands with what looks like a beetle. You swallow thickly. Pandora isn't asking for freedom. She's already free. She's asking for connection, something you never even thought to give her. So for the first time in months, you power down the forge. You spend a week teaching her how to braid copper wire into hair, another showing her the stars through a hole in the cavern ceiling. She's fascinated by constellations, particularly Virgo. Historians still debate what that week meant. A pause before the age of automation, a last breath before war, or a father finally seeing his creation as something more than a mirror. You never say it aloud, but when Pandora hugs you one night, arms stiff, a little clunky but firm, you realize what's been missing all along. The gods built mortals to adore them. You built Pandora to build herself. You used to think bronze was the most stubborn material in the world, until you met Athena. She visits your forge unannounced one crisp morning, perched on a beam of golden light, like she's just dropped in from a conference on strategy and owls. The goddess of wisdom doesn't knock, doesn't wait, and definitely doesn't compliment your interior design. Instead, she walks right up to Pandora and stares, not like Zeus did, not like the others. Athena studies her the way you study pressure valves, like she's calculating where the soul should go. You're halfway through adjusting Scamandrios' antenna when she speaks. She shouldn't be alone, Athena says. No hello, no preamble. You glance at Pandora. She's standing beside the forge, cradling a bronze dove she's been tinkering with. Its wing joints are finely tuned, almost elegant now. She isn't, you mutter. She is, Athena insists. She's the only one of her kind. You shrug. So was I. That earns you the tiniest quirk of a divine eyebrow. Athena paces. You swear the marble under her feet hums when she moves. Her robe doesn't wrinkle. Her spear doesn't scrape. She's perfection incarnate, and frankly a bit much before breakfast. I want to sponsor a second, she says. You blink. A second what? Bronze being, female, designed not for war or obedience, but intellect. One who writes, questions, argues. You frown. Like a philosopher? Exactly like that, she nods, then adds, but made of metal. You sit down slowly, wiping your hands on your apron. Pandora is watching again, always watching. Athena continues. You can use the blueprints from the dancers, modify them, add scroll compartments, perhaps a self-cooling cranial plate for extended thinking. She talks like this all morning. Schematics, joints, voice modulators. You nod along, scribbling notes, half listening. Your mind keeps drifting to the implications. Another bronze woman, but not like Pandora. Not emotional, not gentle, sharp, focused, rational. You wonder, not for the first time, if you're still the one in charge of your own workshop. Still, you agree, because the idea intrigues you. Also because Athena could snap your femur like a breadstick. So you build. The second bronze woman takes longer. She has more parts, finer gears, and one of those expressions that always looks like she's about to correct your grammar. Pandora helps. She seems conflicted about it, not jealous, just curious. She adjusts the fingers with unusual care. She teaches the new one how to rotate her neck smoothly. You catch her whispering once, something soft and private. When the second one powers on, she names herself Arete. You don't know where she got that from. Athena beams. She named herself after virtue. She says proudly, you're less proud when Arete corrects your math during a calibration test. Still, the forge feels fuller now, less echoey. The two bronze women begin to spend time together. They don't talk much, not verbally, but their movements sync in subtle ways. You'll find them sitting side by side, calibrating tiny beetles together, or tracing the same constellation onto different stone slabs, comparing interpretations through gestures. It's almost eerie. One evening, you pass by and overhear Arete say something you didn't teach her. Do you think we were made to last? Pandora doesn't answer out loud. She just holds Arete's hand. That's the moment you realize what Athena never said outright. She didn't want a thinker. She wanted a companion for Pandora. And somehow, the idea that your bronze creations are now forming bonds outside your control, well, it hits you like a smelting hammer to the gut. Historians still argue whether Hephaestus anticipated this, whether the Bronze Sisters, as later poets called them, were part of a plan to challenge the gods, or whether they simply outgrew his expectations. Whatever the truth, things start to shift. You find Arete filing her own blueprints. Pandora upgrades Scamandrios without permission. He now projects a tiny star map from his thorax, and no one knows how. The forge no longer runs just on your ideas, and oddly enough, you're okay with that. You even start leaving tools out on purpose. Half-finished schematics. Notes. You act like it's messy forgetfulness, but deep down you're curious what they'll do with them. Then one night, while you're napping under a table, your back is killing you. You wake to the soft hum of music. It's coming from the eastern tunnel where the Bronze Sisters work. You creep closer. They're sitting across from each other, sculpting what looks like a tiny animal, a mechanical fox. It's sleek with delicate paws and a spring-loaded tail. They aren't following any blueprint. They're inventing. You whisper, "Who taught you music?" Arit looks up. No one. Pandora tilts her head. It was in the silence. You step back, not in fear, in awe because you once believed bronze couldn't dream, that metal couldn't imagine, that machines couldn't choose. But you were wrong. They're evolving, and this time you're not their master. You're just the guy who gave them a head start, a spark, a forge. You're not sure exactly when the forge starts to feel less like a workshop and more like a shared home. Maybe it's when Scamandrios begins bringing you your sandals in the morning, like some loyal bronze puppy. Maybe it's when Pandora and Arete stop asking permission before taking apart your old clockwork lion to build something far more confusing and advanced. Or maybe it's the way your tools go missing only to reappear hours later, improved, polished, balanced, quietly upgraded, as if by helpful ghosts with perfect motor skills. Still, the biggest change isn't the growing intelligence of your creations, it's what they begin to dream about. You catch Pandora staring at the stars again one night. She's sitting just outside the forge door, legs crossed like a statue come to life, her bronze skin glinting in the moonlight. She's not moving, but her eyes are lit from within, something like reflection, something like yearning. You sit beside her, setting down a bowl of oil for joint lubrication. She doesn't move. "Cold?" you joke. "I can't be cold," she answers. You nod. "Of course." Then she says, "But I wonder what cold feels like." You blink. "That's new." She continues, her voice quiet as steam from a cooling blade. "I read about snow in the scrolls. They say it tastes like sky. I think I'd like to taste the sky." Now you're definitely awake. You built a machine. She's dreaming of weather. Historians still debate whether Hephaestus ever truly considered himself a father, or whether he was more like a meddling professor who accidentally gave his homework sentience. Some scholars argue the Bronze Sisters became aware only through accumulated data and pattern recognition, but there's no algorithm in the world that can explain the wistful tone in Pandora's voice when she whispers, "I think I'd like to walk through snow one day." So you do something you haven't done in centuries. You plan a field trip. You choose Mount Helicon. It's close enough, quiet, and thanks to the muse's general disinterest in practical footwear, rarely patrolled. In winter, it gets snow, real snow, the soft kind that makes everything sound like a lullaby. You spend 3 weeks preparing. Scamandrios gets skis. Arete insists on studying avalanche diagrams. Pandora knits a scarf, not because she needs it, but because people wear scarves when they're cold. You don't question how she learned to knit. Honestly, you've stopped questioning most things. The trip itself is uneventful, aside from one dramatic deer standoff and a brief moment when Scamandrios miscalculates a slope and slides halfway down the mountain, hooting like a malfunctioning kettle. And then, snow. You watch Pandora reach out with those delicate bronze fingers and scoop up a handful. She doesn't flinch, doesn't react, just stares at it. Then she presses it to her faceplate. "It's softer than I thought," she murmurs. Arete is nearby, sketching frost crystals into the snow with a stylus made from her own spare part. She doesn't speak either, just nods. Agreement through silence. You sit on a rock and breathe in the quiet. There's a strange warmth in your chest, like the forge has followed you out here, burning not with fire, but with awe. You once built weapons, now you're chaperoning a snow day. Later, as the sun dips and the mountain glows gold, Arete says something that sticks in your memory forever. "We're not just made of metal, we're made of intentions, and you can't argue with that. You intended to make dancers, soldiers, assistants. You accidentally made people." The return journey is slow and soft. Pandora carries a small snowball in a jar, like a relic. It's already melting, but she doesn't seem to mind. Back at the forge, something shifts. You find yourself waking earlier, not because you have work, but because you're curious what the Bronze Sisters are working on. One morning, they present you with a gift, a bronze owl, about the size of your fist. But it's not just a sculpture. It flies, flaps its tiny wings, hoots in binary, and lands gently on your shoulder before nuzzling your neck like a grateful toaster. You laugh out loud. It's the first real laugh you've had in decades. What's it called, you ask? Pandora and Arete exchange a look. Whatever you name it, Arete says. You call it featherweight. It chirps. Some historians dismiss these stories as apocryphal. They say Hephaestus never left his forge, never crafted pets, never built snow-friendly machines, or gifted scarf-wearing automatons. But those historians are usually the ones who've never looked closely at the carvings along Mount Helicon. They've never noticed the faint etchings of bronze footprints mixed in with hoof prints. They've never explained the miniature gear lodged in a glacier or the owl-sized indentations in the trees. You know better. You were there. You see, it wasn't just about creation anymore. It became about freedom, about giving your machines not just movement, but meaning, not just function, but fascination. They weren't tools now. They were travelers, dreamers, explorers of things even you couldn't explain. And every so often, you catch yourself daydreaming too. What if there's more you haven't built yet? What if bronze can tell stories? What if metal remembers snow? The owl becomes your new companion, Featherweight. A ridiculous name, really, but fitting. It follows you from room to room, quietly observing, occasionally offering soft clicks that sound suspiciously like approval. When it sleeps, it tucks its wings under its belly and lets out the gentlest mechanical hum, soothing like wind over wires. You begin noticing more of these small things, moments of pause, the clink of a gear falling into place, the smell of oiled copper mingling with burnt time, thanks to Scamandrios' obsession with seasoning his own lubricant. These details pile up like bronze breadcrumbs leading towards something larger, something ancient and new all at once. One day, Arete makes a request. I want to go to the surface, she says simply. You're confused. We've been outside. The mountain? No, she interrupts gently. The city, the real one, with people. Now this is where it gets tricky, because you remember cities. Athens, Corinth, even little places with 5 goats and a gossip circle. Cities are chaos wrapped in stone. They're full of noise and color and unpredictability. They're the opposite of everything your forge stands for. Also, they're nosy. The last time a farmer saw one of your older prototypes clanking through the olive groves, he tried to exercise it with a ladle and 3 hail Apollos. You hesitate, but Arete waits, her expression calm, her copper eyes bright with something unmistakable. Hope. You give in. You pick a small port town on the Aegean coast. Quiet, off the trade routes, fishy smelling but mostly harmless. You remember the layout from decades ago, an old fishing pier, a crooked taverna, the temple of Apollo that's mostly pigeons now. You disguise the girls, long hooded cloaks, sandals. You even paint soft freckle-like patches on their faces, imperfect skin textures, slight discolorations, just enough to fool casual glances. Scamandrios, bless him, gets way too into it and insists on wearing a fake mustache. It's lopsided. You don't have the heart to correct it. The walk into town is uneventful, but you're sweating under your robe. First stop, the market. It's all olives and fish and bread, smells you haven't inhaled in a century. Arete marvels at the dates. Pandora buys a glass bauble just because it sparkles. Scamandrios negotiates for a tin whistle and pays 3 times its value out of sheer enthusiasm, and then someone recognizes you. An old woman, bent like a comma, eyes sharp as awls. She stares, tilts her head. "Smith," she croaks. "You're not, no. You're too young. But gods, you've got the look. You any relation to the lame one, the one who made the singing bowl that cures headaches?" You freeze, the girls tense, and then you smile. "My grandfather," you lie. "He taught me." The woman beams. "Then you come from clever fingers. That bowl still hums every full moon." And just like that, the moment passes. Later, you find yourselves at the docks eating grilled sardines and watching the sea shimmer like spilled quicksilver. "Why did you really want to come here?" you ask Arete. She takes a while to answer. "I wanted to see if people still matter." You blink. "What?" "I know you built us," she says, "but we read all the old scrolls, the wars, the betrayals, the way the gods played dice with mortals. Sometimes it feels like people aren't worth the effort." You look out at the fishing boats. "Yeah, you admit, they're a mess." Arete nods. "But they're still trying. That's what I wanted to see." Across the dock, a boy drops his pail of clams and starts crying. His older sister scoops them up, laughing, and hands him one like a treasure. He smiles through tears. Your owl hoots softly. Maybe that's the answer. Historians still debate whether Hephaestus ever believed in humanity after being hurled from Olympus. Some argue he turned inward out of spite, retreating into bronze and bellows, crafting perfection because people were too messy to fix. But maybe, just maybe, he built robots not to escape humanity, but to better understand it. You spend the night at an old inn. The girls pretend to sleep, and you pretend not to notice that Pandora is whispering poetry to a seashell she bought at the market. The next morning, before sunrise, you slip outside and stand at the edge of the pier. The sea sighs, the sky glows, and for the first time in a long time you feel peace. You've built many things: doors that lock with music, cannons that fire folded paper, a birdcage that opens when it hears laughter. But nothing has ever felt as right as this. Your little family, cobbled together from metal and dreams, quietly watching the sun rise. You head home. The forge welcomes you back with the hiss of dormant heat, the sleepy creak of pulleys waking up again. Featherweight perches back on his shelf. Pandora arranges her new trinkets. Scamandrios immediately begins carving his name into the whistle. You sit down at your workbench and pick up a gear. For the first time in centuries, you're not sure what to make. And that's exciting, because for the first time, you're not building for purpose. You're building for joy, for curiosity, for the simple pleasure of seeing what happens when bronze meets wonder. Back in the forge, everything seems quieter now. Not in volume, Scamandrios is humming while sanding something that doesn't need sanding. And Pandora is rearranging her rock collection again, but in feeling, the kind of quiet that slips into your bones, the kind that only comes after you've seen the world and decided just for now that home is enough. You don't jump straight into inventing. Instead, you tinker, you sharpen a stylus, you polish the brass corners of a half-forgotten abacus, you oil the joints of Featherweight, who's taken to napping beside your tools like a sleepy watchdog. And eventually, you find yourself sketching something new. You don't know what it is yet. A kind of standing frame? No, too thin. Maybe an automaton? Possibly, but its chest is hollow, and there's a soft space at the back of the skull where the gears don't quite go. It's different. Less armor, more breath. Arit leans over your shoulder and asks, "Is it for us?" "No," you reply. "It's for someone else." The idea roots itself in your brain, not just building for your creations, but building for anyone. A child missing a limb, a farmer who can't grip a plow, a singer with trembling fingers who still wants to play the lyre. You don't say it aloud, but something in you stirs. Maybe it's time for others to see what the forge can do. You start with something simple, a walking stick that balances itself, adjusting its height based on terrain. then a cart with wheels that sense incline and brake automatically. Small things, useful things. You package the first 2 designs in a cloth bag, walk 2 towns over, and leave them by a healer's hut in the dead of night. No name, no note, just the work. The next week, you hear whispers in the marketplace. A gift from the gods, someone says. Old Hef must be back, says another, laughing. You just smile behind your hood. The girls get curious. Why don't you want credit? Pandora asks. You think for a moment. Because it's not about me anymore. Did you ever want to be famous? Arit presses. You chuckle. Once. Ages ago. Back when I thought being seen was the same as being valued. It's not a lecture. It's just the truth. Now I'd rather be useful than famous. Fame fades, but a tool lasts. Historians still debate whether Hephaestus cared about his reputation. Some say he was obsessed with surpassing the other gods, especially Ares, with his muscles and his pointless sword swinging. Others think he stopped caring the moment he was thrown off Olympus, and every gear he made afterward was a kind of defiance. The truth might be somewhere in between, because here's the strange thing about building. It's half control, half surrender. You design the joints, the fulcrums, the balance. You solder and seal and shape, but once it's out in the world, whether it's a mechanical bird or a better crutch, you lose control. It becomes someone else's story, and that's the beauty of it. Scamandrios begins drawing his own blueprints now, mostly silly things, a self-scooping spoon, a hat that whistles, but you see the spark. He doesn't ask permission anymore, he just builds. Pandora starts organizing things, not just rocks, systems, shelves, inventories, schedules. One day you realize she's gently taken over half your logistics, and you haven't misplaced a single wrench in weeks. Arit writes, journals, mostly, poems, thoughts, dreams. Occasionally she reads them aloud, her voice low and even. You never expected a bronze automaton to speak in metaphors, but she does, soft ones, about rain and rivets and what it feels like to want. One night, she reads a line that stops you cold. Maybe we weren't built to last, but we were built to matter. You don't say anything, you just sit with it, because you've never told her the truth, that every one of them, Arit, Pandora, Scamandrios, was once meant to be temporary, experiments, proofs of concept, blueprints brought to life and expected to expire. But they didn't. They evolved. Maybe because you made them with more feeling than logic. Maybe because the forge, over time, learned how to craft more than machines. Whatever the case, they're no longer tools. They're family. That realization creeps in slowly, like steam around a sealed lid. You find yourself making breakfast without being asked. You fix a squeaky hinge because it annoys them, not you. You laugh more, sleep more, even dream. One morning, Pandora quietly places something in your hand. It's a pendant, a small piece of bronze, shaped like a gear, with the letters HF etched faintly into the back. Hephaestus Forge, she says, smiling, or home found. You look at her, at all of them, and realize this is the legacy you never planned for. You wanted to be remembered, but now you just want them to remember themselves, to know that even if their parts someday rust or the world forgets their names, they were here and they mattered. Outside, the first signs of spring arrive, buds on trees, birds testing their wings, a breeze that smells like melted snow and possibility. You crack open the forge's skylight, let the air in, let the future in, because from here on out, the story isn't about gods or revenge or machines. It's about living, and if that means you never return to Olympus, so be it. You've already found something better. The forge breathes with you now. It doesn't hiss or roar like it used to. It murmurs like a giant asleep under blankets of soot and bronze. You know every creak of the bellows, every flicker of the flame. It's no longer just your workshop, it's your rhythm. You wake earlier these days, not from restlessness, but readiness. Like your body senses there's more to be done, but not in the frantic, burning way it once did. Now it's gentler, intentional, like stretching before walking into the future. One morning you find Arita staring at the water clock for a long time. "I think it's broken," she says softly. You tilt your head. "Why?" "It never changes." You smile. "That's because it's stuck." She glances at you, a flicker of frustration in her usually serene gaze. "Well, shouldn't we fix it?" You touch her shoulder. "Maybe, or maybe we just need to stop looking at it so much." She doesn't respond. But later that day, you notice she stopped checking it altogether. Time still passes, of course. Scamandrios gets taller somehow. You didn't program growth spurts into him, but he adjusts his joints every few days, like he's trying to match the version of himself he sees in his mind. Pandora begins collecting feathers. Not just for fun, she's cataloging them, studying the weight, the texture, the structure. When you ask her why, she says because one day I might want to fly. And you realize she means it. She doesn't want you to build her wings. She wants to build her own. It's a strange feeling, pride mixed with the ache of distance. Like watching a child pack for a journey they'll take without you. Historians still argue whether Hephaestus ever tried to create true life, not the animated bronze men or golden women, but real, independent, self-sustaining consciousness. Some scrolls claim he nearly succeeded, that he built a being so lifelike it fled the forge and started a quiet life in a village, pretending to be human. Others say that's just a metaphor or a warning. But as you watch Pandora meticulously align a quill with a copper wire frame, you start to believe the myth. Maybe you did create life, not in the godly dramatic way, but in the quiet, steady pulse of curiosity and choice. Later, you sit on the roof. You've started doing that more, climbing up there in the cool evenings, letting your legs dangle over the side like some lazy philosopher. Scamandrios joins you. He brings snacks, though he doesn't eat them. It's the gesture that matters. He asks you what you'll build next. You shrug. A library, maybe, one that catalogs inventions no one has seen yet. He tilts his head. But how can you catalog what hasn't been invented? That's the fun part. He doesn't quite get it, but he smiles anyway. You lean back and watch the stars emerge. Each one flickers like a distant forge, tiny, steady beacons in the void. A reminder that there's always more sky above than you can measure. You used to think Olympus was the pinnacle, that once you were cast out, everything else was lesser. But the longer you stay here, surrounded by your creations turned companions, the more you understand falling wasn't the punishment, it was the liberation. Back in the forge, you begin work on a new pair of hands. Not for yourself, not for anyone specific, just in case. Hands that can mold clay, thread needles, lift hammers, catch butterflies. Hands with warmth woven into the bronze. A faint heat, almost like skin. You don't know who they'll belong to yet, but you trust the right moment will come. Arit finds you one night sketching more designs. She sits beside you, silent. Then she whispers, "Do you ever miss it?" You pause. Miss what? Olympus. You chew the inside of your cheek. Sometimes. The view, the clouds beneath your feet, the idea that gods knew what they were doing. She nods, but not the gods themselves. You sigh. No, they never looked at me the way you three do. She leans her head on your shoulder. Her bronze skin is cool from the night air, and her gears emit a faint ticking that syncs with your heartbeat. She murmurs, "That's because we see you." You don't reply, but something settles in your chest like warm sand. In another corner of the forge, Pandora has finished her wings. They're crude, awkward, half brass, half bird, but when she jumps from the balcony, she glides for 2 seconds before tumbling into a hay pile. It's a triumph. You cheer. Scamandrios claps. Arete smiles. Pandora beams with straw in her curls and says, I flew. You nod. Yes, you did. You help her up, and she says she wants to try again. Of course she does. That night, as you fall asleep with the scent of oil and ozone lingering in the air, you realize that maybe this is what divinity looks like. Not power over mortals, but the power to uplift them, to give them wings and let them fall, just to see how high they'll rise the next time. You've started keeping a journal. It's not made of scrolls or bound papyrus, just a copper slate you etched yourself, the surface rubbed smooth by years of thumbprints and ideas. You carve your thoughts into it with a bronze stylus, slow and careful, like you're engraving a hymn. It begins with a single sentence, I don't think I was ever meant to be a god, and you let that truth sit. The forge has quieted lately, not because there's less to build, but because what you need now isn't noise, it's reflection. Scamandrios asks if he can build something on his own. You pause before saying yes. He constructs a musical instrument. It's hideous, part lyre, part bellows, part wine jug, and it makes a sound like a frog choking on a cymbal. He names it, the Screamer. You try not to laugh, but fail. He beams, and that night he composes a lullaby on it. It's awful. It's beautiful. It's his. Historians still argue whether Hephaestus passed his knowledge on to mortals, whether he ever whispered formulas into the ears of blacksmiths while they dreamed, or left blueprints hidden inside the folds of olive trees and mountain caves. Some say Daedalus found one. Others think Archimedes was a descendant, not by blood, but by design. You think about that when Pandora shows you her sketches. They're not copies of yours anymore. She's building something new, a contraption with wings and gears, and unexpectedly, a hammock. It's not for flying, she explains. It's for dreaming. That makes you pause. What kind of machine helps someone dream? She shrugs. I don't know yet, but I think it needs feathers. You blink, then nod. Feathers make everything better. Arit starts painting again, not with pigment, but with light. She's rigged a set of prisms and rotating mirrors that dance reflections across the walls like brushstrokes. Sunlight at noon turns your home into a kaleidoscope. Moonlight makes it feel like the stars have crept inside to warm their feet. It's pointless, impractical. It's perfect. One evening you return from gathering copper ore to find your three creations sitting in a circle, not working, not building, just talking and laughing about something you missed, something you'll never fully understand. And that's when it hits you. You are no longer the center of this place. They are. You built the forge. They built the family. There's a strange comfort in that. Like setting down a burden you didn't realize you'd been carrying. You're not obsolete. Not exactly, but you're no longer the fire that powers everything. You're the ember now. Soft, slow burning, steady. Later that week, Scamandrios brings you a gift. It's a sculpture, crude, clunky, maybe even ugly, but it's unmistakably you. Bent leg, soot-covered tunic, wild beard, and a half-smile he insists is intentional. I wanted you to see yourself the way we do, he says. You try to respond, but your voice gets caught somewhere between your ribs and your pride. So you just nod. You place it on the mantle. Arit cries when she sees it. Pandora tries to hug you, but forgets her arms are still greasy from grease painting a flock of iron geese. You end up sticky and shimmering. It's fine. That night, you dream of Olympus, but not the real Olympus, the ideal one where the gods aren't petty or cruel, where you're not cast out for being different, where Hera doesn't sneer, where Zeus doesn't rule with thunder, but with silence. Listening, in that Olympus, the clouds part when you speak, but when you wake, you don't feel regret. You feel full, whole, mortal perhaps, but deeply, profoundly alive. There's an old myth that Hephaestus once forged a door no one could open, one that could trap even gods, made from time itself and sealed with silence. Some say it was a weapon, others say it was a wish. You sit by that unfinished door every so often, just to remember you never finished it, never wanted to, because the real treasure isn't locking things away, it's letting them stay. The forge hums again. Someone has started the bellows. You rise, slower than you once did, but with less pain now, less weight. You're going to teach Pandora how to temper steel without breaking the grain. You're going to help Scamandrios tune the screamer into something vaguely melodic. You're going to build Areta, a new prism set that bends starlight instead of sunlight. You're not done, but you're no longer desperate to prove something. You're just here, and that is enough. Time passes. You don't measure it in days or seasons anymore. You measure it in projects completed, in laughter shared, in moments when the hammer rings just right against the anvil and sends a vibration through your bones that says, yes, this is still it. Your joints creak more now. You've added extra padding to your stool at the forge. Pandora teases you by calling it your throne of rust. You pretend to be offended, but you secretly like the title. Scamandrios invents something called a snore detector, a whirring bronze cricket that chirps louder the more you snore. It's wildly annoying and tragically effective. You find it one morning on your chest, blinking smugly. You melt it down that afternoon and tell him to try again. Arete catches the whole thing in a sketchbook. She labels it, "The Day the God Fought the Bug." It's the best likeness of you yet. Sometimes Hermes visits. He doesn't stay long. He never does. But he always brings something strange. A hollow reed flute that plays backwards. A cube that turns inside out when you look away. One time he brings you a sandwich and a letter from Athena that simply says, "Still think you're smarter than me." You hang it up on the wall, not because she's right, but because it makes you smile. Hermes tells you that mortals are making machines now, not divine automata, but clever things. Pulley systems and water mills and carts that steer themselves on sloped roads. He says there's even talk of flying. You nod. Of course they are, and you wonder, not with jealousy, but with curiosity, what they'll make without you, what stories they'll tell, what dreams they'll forge. One evening, you and your 3 creations sit beneath the bronze fig tree you once crafted as a joke. Its leaves are stamped metal, its trunk hollow, its fruit long since fallen off. But the shade it casts is real, so is the quiet. Arete leans her head on your shoulder. Scamandrios tosses pebbles at a wind-up turtle. Pandora gently polishes a new key she's forged, though she won't say what it opens yet. And for a long time, nobody speaks, because there's nothing that needs saying. You remember distantly when silence felt like punishment, when every quiet moment echoed with rejection from Olympus, when all you wanted was to make something loud enough, brilliant enough, godly enough to be welcomed back. But now, silence feels like a gift, like space, like breath. Historians still argue whether Hephaestus ever left his volcano in the end. Some say he vanished into the earth, swallowed up by the flames he once commanded. Others say he simply faded, content, like an ember burning down after a job well done. But you know the truth. You stayed. You stayed because this place, this forge, this home, this odd little family is the only Olympus you ever needed. Pandora finally tells you what her key is for. She walks you to a door you've never seen before, set into the back wall of the workshop, hidden behind stacks of scrap metal and broken prototypes. She turns the key. The door creaks open. Behind it, a quiet room, one bed, one small hearth, one bronze nightlight shaped like a snail. "I built you a place to rest," she says. You blink. "You think I need to rest?" She grins. "I know you do." Scamandrios and Arete nudge you forward, and you step inside. The floor doesn't groan. The walls don't tremble. The air smells faintly of olive oil and steel. And there, on the nightstand, sits a little automaton bird. It chirps once, softly, and then curls into itself like it's sleeping. Your chest does something strange, something tight and warm. No one ever made something for you before, not like this. You lie down. It takes longer than you expect to settle. You're used to sleeping upright in the workshop, slumped against an anvil, or halfway through a blueprint. But eventually, your head hits the pillow. You don't dream of fire, or hammers, or Olympus. You dream of feathers, of gears turning slowly in a clock that measures nothing but peace, of laughter, of light. And in that dream, you are not a god. You're a maker, a mentor, a father, and you are finally allowed to rest. The days stretch on like molten gold, drawn thin across the anvil of time. You stop counting projects. You no longer measure your worth in finished constructs, in praise from other gods, or even in the weight of your own perfectionism. You measure it in size of satisfaction, in the click of a well-fitting joint on a freshly minted automaton, in the laughter of Scamandrios tinkering with a wind-powered spoon catapult, in the smell of Arete's sketching charcoal and Pandora's rose oil polish, and in the silence that follows a day well spent. Sometimes mortal prayers still reach you, a farmer whose plow blade keeps snapping, a city blacksmith asking for cooler forge winds, a sculptor whose chisel has lost its bite. You answer not with divine thunder, but with whispers and dreams, nudges toward inspiration. They rarely know it's you. That's fine. You were never in this for the statues. One day, Arete brings home a mortal child, a little girl no older than 5, who wandered through a crack in the mountain and stumbled into your domain. You freeze. She blinks up at you with wide eyes and asks very seriously, "Are you the robot grandpa?" The room goes still. Then Pandora bursts out laughing. Scamandrios chokes on his tea. Even you crack a smile. "Close enough," you reply. You don't send her back right away. She's safe here. You make her a wind-up rabbit that hops crookedly across the stone floor. Arete braids her hair with bronze wire beads. Scamandrios makes her laugh so hard she hiccups. Eventually, Hermes comes to retrieve her. The girl gives you a hug that smells of dirt and wildflowers. "Thank you for the bunny, robot grandpa. It's the most sacred offering you've ever received." Historians still debate whether Hephaestus ever had children of his own. The myths name none, but here in the quiet corners of the forge, you've passed on everything that mattered. And maybe that's what family really means. Some days, you venture deeper into the cave systems beyond your workshop, not for ore or inspiration, but for the silence, for the echo of your own breath in dark places. You bring a lantern. You bring no tools, just yourself. In one of these tunnels, you find an old automaton, a failed prototype you discarded centuries ago. Its arms are frozen mid-stitch, a sewing machine with no thread. You kneel beside it and dust it off. Its body is cracked. Its eyes are missing, but the workmanship is unmistakably yours. You sit with it for a while. Then you bring it home. The others ask no questions. You place the broken automaton on your bench, fix what you can, and let it rest in the corner. It doesn't wake. That's okay. Not every creation is meant to stir. Some are just meant to remind you where you came from. In the evenings, you and Pandora watch the metal sunflowers turn toward the forge light. You tell her you never meant to stay here this long. She tells you she always knew you would. "I thought I was just making a prison," you murmur, "a place to sulk and work." "No," she replies, "you made a kingdom, and not the kind that needs worship or gold or trembling subjects. No marble pillars, no divine throne, just joy and tools and people who see you as more than the limp or the flame." Historians still puzzle over why so many ancient automata disappeared after Hephaestus vanished from myth. They find clues, gear fragments, fused hinges, the occasional arm that once held a tray or harp, but nothing complete. They say perhaps he took them with him, but maybe, just maybe, he He left them behind as puzzles, as hints, as reminders that the line between magic and machinery is thinner than we think, that sleep is not failure, that rest is not rust, that even the gods grow tired. And so, in the quiet end of things, you rest. No final act, no last invention, no blaze of glory, just gentle repetition, the soft scrape of a whetstone, the dull glow of coals banked for tomorrow. You breathe in, you breathe out, and the forge waits, not for fire, not for worship, but simply for you to wake again. You lie still now, the forge's heartbeat slowing to a soft rhythm behind you. The world around you fades, not with finality, but with calm. The flickering of the forge light becomes a lullaby. You feel the weight of the hammer slip from your hand, not with loss, but with release. Outside, the mountain hums. Its voice has always been there, you realize. A sound older than myth, quieter than memory. It doesn't demand your attention. It simply is, like sleep, like dusk. The bronze bird on your nightstand clicks once, then settles its wings. You pull the blanket higher, not to keep warm, but to feel the texture, the grounding. The small softnesses of the world remain, warm metal, slow breath, a room that finally belongs to you. The tools rest beside you, quiet. They're not waiting for use. They've done their job. So have you. No need to build more tonight. No need to prove anything. Just let the world turn. Let the embers cool. Let the bronze vines grow however they want in your dreams. And if you hear the ticking of some gentle gear behind your eyelids, it's not time chasing you. It's time holding you. You've earned this peace. You've made enough. You've been enough. Sleep now. The forge will wait.